So you find a recipe online and it looks amazing. Everybody's saying how great their baked goods came out and you want to give it a try. Something happens along the way and for some reason yours did not come out as good as you wanted to. So what can you do? In this video, I am going to give you 5 tips for recipe success. So many times I go online and I find recipes that look like they're gonna be really good. I always make sure and read the reviews, but I always find that there's a few people have a hard time with it, and it makes me think that maybe as bakers and professionals, we sometimes forget to explain or state things that are for us second nature. So here are 5 tips that I think might be helpful for you to have recipe success. Tip number 1, read your recipe twice. Why do you want to read it twice? Because you don't want to just skim through it. You don't want to just make sure you know the ingredients and forget about the rest. You want to make sure you actually read it and know exactly what you're supposed to be doing for many reasons. For example, if the recipe seems challenging and you still want to go ahead and do it, you want to make sure you have double the amount of ingredients just in case the first time it doesn't come out right and you have to bake it twice. Another reason is just in case you miss something and it says, oh, do this part 2 days in advance or a day in advance. There are some recipes that call for some steps that need to be done 24 hours ahead and you don't want to miss it, so you want to read it twice. Number 2, plan ahead. I cannot stress how important this is. Like I said in the step before, sometimes you need to prepare some things ahead of time, like the day before or even 2 days before. And number 2, you cannot, if you need a cake to be done in an hour and you have missed some of these steps, the cake is not going to come out right. There's no way, no chance it's going to happen. There are things that always must happen. For example, ingredients must be room temperature. This baking is all about chemistry and how ingredients react with other ingredients to have some certain reactions. And when you use cold ingredients, they don't have the same reaction as when you use warm ingredients or when you use room temperature ingredients. So unless the recipe says to use something cold, always make sure your ingredients are room temperature. Another thing you always need to do ahead of time is prep your pans. If it says to butter and flour ahead of time. If it says to use parchment paper, have the parchment paper cut out before. Always have your oven ready. You don't want to be done with the recipe, be done with the mixing of all the ingredients. These chemical reactions are already happening inside your batter, only to realize that your oven is not hot and you're going to need to wait for it. That's not going to be a successful recipe. Tip number 3, do not mess with the recipe. Somebody has tried this recipe and had success with this recipe, so let's keep the ingredients measured correctly. Let's keep the ingredients the right ingredients, and let's just not mess with the recipe. So if the recipe says to use whole milk, don't substitute it. Don't use skim milk because the amount of fat in skim milk is not the same, so the chemical reaction will not work properly. If it calls for an ingredient, just know that if you are going to substitute it, there is a good chance that it might not work out very well. So don't. Another thing is just be very careful with the measuring. Measure accurately. If the recipe says a cup of sugar, use a real cup. One of these. This is a cup, but it will not have the same measurement. This could be considered a cup, will definitely not be the same measurement. And when you do measure, this is not a cup. This is not going to be successful recipe following. You need to level it. That's a cup. And it goes the same with your teaspoons, with your tablespoons. If you measure something, it needs to be leveled and full. You can't go halfway and say that's a tablespoon because it's not. But that's not a tablespoon because it's too full. It needs to be perfect. This is right. So do not mess with the recipe. Recipes are baking and recipes, it's a science. Don't mess with it. Tip number 4, do not overmix. I know the mixers are so fun and we really want to just hit it all the way to the end and watch it go super fast, thinking that it might be faster to do it that way, but don't, because if the recipe says to mix at slow speed, keep it that way, because like I said, the chemical reactions happening in there need to happen properly. So don't mess with that. If it says to mix for 5 minutes, then mix it for 5 minutes. But for the most part, not over mixing is the safe way to go. So if it says mix the ingredients, then just mix them enough until they're mixed, especially in chocolate recipes. If you keep mixing, then you end up with very stiff, hard cakes that don't fluff the same way. So you don't want to do that. So follow the recipe. Do not over mix. Tip number 5, do not trust the time in the recipe, trust the toothpick. Some recipes are made across the world in a different place with different humidity in a different oven, so it's pretty hard to tell exactly to a T how long your cake needs to be in the oven. The only one who knows that is you, so use the time that the recipe tells you as a guideline, but don't follow it specifically. If your cake doesn't look done, but the timer says it is done, don't trust the timer, trust the toothpick. Put the toothpick in there. If it comes out pretty clean, maybe a crumb or two, then it's ready. But if it still has liquid stuff in it, it's definitely not ready. And if your cake's starting to look ready and smell cooked, do the toothpick test. If it's already ready and the timer says you still have 10 minutes to go, take it out. Trust the toothpick. All right, guys, and here is one bonus tip for you guys, storing the cakes. When the cake comes out of the oven, you want to give it enough time to not air dry, just to come to room temperature. And once that is done, carefully take them out of the pan and you can wrap them in plastic wrap, 1 or 2 layers, and keep them in the fridge overnight. That way, the next day when you're putting your cake together, it is ready to be cut and frosted and all of that good stuff. So make sure wrap them carefully and they will stay dry. No, they will stay moist. You don't want them dry. That's it. Okay guys, those are 5 tips to help your recipe be successful. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there are any tips that you would like to share with us, please comment below. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next week.